Okay, good morning, everybody. We're going to go ahead and kick off today. So if everybody can take your seats and if we can have your attention, please. So we have just a half day today. We'll be ending around lunchtime. So give everybody a little bit of a break this afternoon to relax. Looks like we are settling in. So I think if we can go ahead and get the slides up for Mr. Oppo. Excellent. So our first speaker is Mr. Emmanuel Appo from here at Afri-Set, and he'll be talking about policy and regulations.
Thank you. Good morning. Okay, as Dan rightly said, I'm Emmanuel Appo from Afri-Set. I'm presenting on the policies and then regulations that are associated with air pollution in Ghana. And this is my presentation outline. We'll look at the introduction and why we even need air quality management. And then we look at the governance structure and what institutional roles are supposed to be in terms of air quality management in the country. And then we'll look at the strategies that have taken place over the years and then the status that we are now in. And then we'll conclude on that. You all know that the atmosphere contains gases and there are various sources of pollution. We have the natural sources, we have the anthropogenic sources, which is man-made, and then we have receptors for these emissions. Emissions from the human sources and natural sources normally end up into the atmosphere. So they form gaseous pollutants, especially the SO2 and other gases that are emitted into the atmosphere. And when they get to the atmosphere, depending on the conditions in the atmosphere, they may drop back to the earth or the ground, or they may remain there for some time. Some can remain there for millions of years. Others also are short-lived, and they can come down immediately. And then we also know that precipitation or rainfall or cloud or water vapor can also increase the weight of the particulate matter and let them drop into the land or the ocean. And then have the pollutants that are also dry in the atmosphere. With time, they can also drop. So there is an upward emissions that goes up, and the same, some of the emissions in one way or the other can also come back to the earth. I want us to look at the natural versus artificial man-made source. Mostly many pollutants are noted to occur naturally, as I've said, and then in the atmosphere, they may be in lower concentrations, and notably of them are the dust, the harmattan in Africa here, or our sub-region. We are experiencing a lot of harmattan, especially around this time. Wind, that brings a lot of dust. When you go to Middle East, they have what we call the yellow dust, which can also be carried as far as from Middle East to Japan and other countries there. Then we also have the gases like SO2 and volcano actions that can also lead to emissions. And then we also have the VOCs from automobile transport, which is a worldwide problem now. And then we have other smoke and other things that are being emitted. I think when you came here, you saw some trash burning and you could see some smoke going up there. And so the composition as it stays naturally when God created the earth and everything said everything was good. We were expecting that the composition of nitrogen should not exceed 78%, oxygen 21%, and then argon less than 1%, carbon dioxide lower, and others in trace forms. But what do we see? Man-made activities, volcanic activities. In Ghana here, we have a lot of sources. Most sources have already been mentioned. So if you look at the picture on the screen, we have from it cuts across almost everywhere in our country. There are a lot of pollution sources coming from industry, unpaved roads, construction, motor vehicle, diesel-powered vehicles, smoking, a lot of congestions, natural bushfires, artificial bushfires. We have our cooking practices, and then trash, poor trash management. And then we also have people trying to recycle electronic waste, among others. All these things tend to emit a lot of plumes into the atmosphere. And you have a lot of gases that are being generated. So most of these gases are short-lived. These are short-lived climate pollutants. And they have implications also on the climate. And most of they have global warming potentials. So whatever comes out of our actions into the atmosphere can affect the climate, can affect human beings. So you have all these lot of gases that are going on to offset the balance that is supposed to exist naturally. And if it happens like that, then we see that the exceedance of these chemicals that are being emitted into the atmosphere, the quantity and the duration that are harmful to human beings, then we say it's an air pollution. So normally we use the air pollution is only the quantities you can emit into the atmosphere. But if the quantities and the time and durations that are being emitted are manageable, then it is not the effects are not how do you call it, in extreme or not harmful. But if they tend to exceed certain threshold, certain how do you call it, targets, then the effect becomes more pronounced. So I think this one, Dr. Westerville had already shown it. Air pollution ranked 5th among the all-cause mortality in 2017. And you could see that there are a lot of, most of them associated with respiratory, cardiovascular, chronic diseases, among others. So the burden of diseases is very pronounced and more elaborate. We tend to have a lot of bronchitis, a lot of trachea, scarifications. We have cancer, heart attacks, preterm birth, low birth weights, and then also sometimes it also facilitates the buildup of fat in most of our fats and cholesterol in the arterial walls. And when they test this one, normally we term this one as a plague. And when it happens, it impedes blood flow. And sometimes people don't have the natural, and if this thing happens and becomes more pronounced, then you tend to have high blood pressure. Because the heart has to pump more blood to be able to remove this. And the more the pressure is exerted on the heart or the muscles of the heart, then it leads to a lot of the condition we call the high blood pressure. And this can also affect the brain. So it can lead to brain deterioration and then a premature death. In plants, it can block, particulate matter in particular can block stomatal pores. It can reduce transpiration. It can also reduce UV light absorption, and then can also reduce productivity and general effect on food chain. So our actions not only affect the atmosphere and the humans, but plants. When you look at the Ghanaian setting, I've taken about 2 or 3 major cities in Ghana here with almost the highest populations. and then the highest landmark, and then a lot of activities that happens here is the Accra, Tema, and Kumasi. So if you look at this graph here, you could see that during the dry season, the levels are very high across all the cities. And then during the wet season or the rainy season, the levels are a bit lower. But the dry season levels exceeded the Ghana standards of 35 micrograms per meter cube for PM 2.5. And then when you look at the WHO, it falls far, far, far below. So all this test to tell that the pollution problem, though over the years have been reducing in Ghana, we are still not there. So most of these particulates, when they enter into the trachea or the windpipe, they tend to cause a lot of disturbances around the walls. And these trachea walls become scarificated. They are scarified. And sometimes you see scars formation in between them, and constriction and contractions of the walls normally lead to a lot, sometimes bleeding of this windpipe or tube. So you could see that sometimes those of you who have been living in sub-Saharan Africa here, sometimes you may cough and you tend to have some blood stains. Have you experienced that before? Within West Africa here. So these are some of the effects. Some can also affect the arteries that supply blood to the system. So in extreme cases, they can also rupture. So the risk is very high. More people are dying. West Africa here, children, the most vulnerable people are the children. They are getting problems and they are dying. Over 400,000 are dying from West Africa here. And then if you look at the Ghana setting, about 28,000 die annually. And the economic bandit is very, very high. I think this has been mentioned. About 250 billion US dollar globally. Ghana, 2.5 billion, which is equivalent to 4.2% of our GDP. And this was gotten from the World Bank Country Environmental Analysis. Ghana in 2020. Then in Nigeria, because if you look at Ghana and Nigeria, when you combine them, they are the economic powerhouse in West Africa. And then if you look at Nigeria, Nigeria has about 2.1 billion US dollars lost. And this is about 631 billion naira. And it's equivalent to 1.3% of Lagos State GDP. This is also coming from World Bank analysis. So the situation is very high. The health implications and the cost is very, very high. So what do we do? Knowing all these things, we need to have well-structured governance, how do you call it, to be able to help reduce the impact of air pollution in our regions. So if you look at the key mandate that is given to the country is coming from the Ghana's constitution. That's the supreme law, the Constitution of Ghana. And then we have the environmental protection agencies. Based on the mandate of the Constitution, we have the EPA Act, and then the regulations to control emissions in one way or the other. Then we have the climate and environmental policies and other aspects. So what does the Constitution say? Article 36(9) says that the state is required to safeguard the national environment for posterity. So the whole thing is on the states. And who is the state? The state cannot do that, like a central government cannot do all these things. But it has to come out with institutions that are representative enough to be able to perform this task.